to our listeners, whether you're listening live at a later time. Daryl's on the panel this coming Monday morning. It's the final property brunch. I'm a bit sad, really. I don't want it to stop. It will come back in July. Frequency, I'm not sure, but it definitely will be back in July because there's panels which people do want to hear. I just literally want a week's break, to be fair, because the week coming up is a really intensive week. Daryl's going to be with me a number of times Monday morning on the evolution of buy-to-let. Daryl, you're going to be joined by Stuart Scott, an award-winning developer, stroke investor. I've been to see his sites many times in Brighton, Hove area. He's also got sites in Worthing as well. We've got Tony Egan, Sam Loney, and as I say, yourself. So 4 panelists this particular week, because we've reduced the panel time down to 40 minutes. So just for the listeners out there, what do you think the key question Jack Jiggins of EXP Property Investment should be asking?
Well, I'm sure Jack will have many of his own questions, but the one on my mind is just how the coronavirus period has changed what tenants will want from their buy-to-let properties. And obviously what tenants want is ultimately the most important thing, because that's what drives a landlord's income and their success. So I've read a lot of stuff. So Savills, Knight Frank, a lot of the big agents have been putting out some kind of early kind of research type publications, and all the noise at the moment is that there's much more demand in non-city areas. Demand for sort of more rural or kind of out of town property has gone through the roof, and people are very focused on.
Oh, that's interesting. So, have they said that already, Daryl? About yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing to say with that is a lot of these are based on buyer inquiries, because that's the most important thing for the agents. But it'll follow through that tenants are likely to want a similar thing as buyers are likely to want. So I think the same trends are relevant. So outdoor space becoming more important. I also think space within the home to be able to work from home will become more important, because working from home is here to stay, at least to some extent in my view. And that might just change what sort of properties rent for a premium and what doesn't.
Okay, so look, it's interesting about rural people talking about gardens and maybe more suburban, but depends on who you listen to as well. They're giving different, because at the end of the day, at the moment, it's so early to say what's going to happen. Look,
the other school of thought on that is I was on a conference call with Paul Obenschreider actually and Sam a while ago, a bit earlier in the crisis, and we were talking about what we think might happen to the property market as a result of everything that's gone on. And actually, Paul said something really interesting that stayed with me the whole time. So Paul's obviously American, and he said that when 9/11 happened, there was all the talk afterwards that people will never get on a plane again, and they'll never go up to the 35th floor in a tower block ever again. And for 6 months, that was kind of true. People didn't want to get on a plane, they didn't want to go up a tower block. But then after that, everyone reverted to type and went back to what they were doing before, which is also a really interesting view, because there is a chance that some of the stuff that's happened as a result of coronavirus will follow the same path, and that we'll kind of forget once we're over it. But we'll see.
I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I can understand that if it's just one wave, but the ideology or the idea that there could be a second wave or third wave, looking at the Spanish flu historically.
9/11 happened, and then there was kind of an aftermath that was kind of away from New York. Whereas the difference with this one is quite right. The coronavirus is here to stay, so we've got to live with it. So perhaps it is harder to forget the experience that people have had during the lockdown.
So look, we do welcome questions from the audience as well. I can't see them on my own personal page for some reason. I can see them on my business page for Bequin Events. Daryl, before we went online, we were discussing bounce back loans. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yes, it's been a really interesting and slightly worrying from my perspective development this week on bounce back loans. So one of the challenges with them is that it's not really clear what they're supposed to be used for. So it's kind of left up to everyone to make their own kind of moral choice around whether or not it's right for them to benefit from a bounce back loan. But one very, very large buy-to-let mortgage lender does a very large proportion of the limited company buy-to-let and individual buy-to-let in the market. They're taking the view this week that anyone who's had a bounce back loan even if it's not being used as a deposit, but they just have had a bounce back loan at some point and they become aware. So normally they become aware by looking at bank statements generally. They've declined to lend to them, full stop.
When did that happen, Daryl? Because I haven't heard that, to be fair.
So it won't be announced, but we know it's happened because it's happened on cases that we're working on for clients. So we've got the communication that way around. So unfortunately, those cases now need to find a new home. But they have, I mean, that particular lender probably has the most competitive limited company buy-to-let products on the market. I don't know whether others will follow suit or whether others will take a different view. It's early days, but it's clearly a little bit of a worry. That, you know, particularly from my perspective as a short-term kind of bridging lender, we want to make sure that if people are using bounce back loans within their business and they buy a new property and they refurbish them and they prepare them for let, they can get a mortgage at the end. So that's definitely on my mind this week, that it's not, the sort of story's not really over on bounce back loans, much like the mortgage holidays, where at the start there was a lot of noise around, you know, make sure you take your mortgage holiday, and then, you know, a few of us were kind of sounding warnings against that, and that kind of came true as well, that lenders were wary of anyone who's taken a mortgage holiday. And I think the same trend is now happening with bounce back loans, but I'm hopeful that other lenders in the market don't take the same view and are a little bit more relaxed. But what mortgage lenders so far certainly won't do is allow bounce back loans to be used as part of a deposit. So I'm not aware of any lender that's allowing that right now.
That's interesting. So possibly breaking news here in the public domain. I don't know, but it's the first time I've heard that, to be fair. And I've been on a number of Zoom calls this week, and it's interesting to know. So do you think that could be, well, I was going to say short-term measure, but that could be fairly heavy hitting if that's going to be the case? I don't know what the stats are on how many property investors stroke developers have taken bounce back loans.
I think, do you know what, that is an absolutely key point for me, because within our kind of property circles that are in, you know, that network and are online, there's a lot of noise about bounce back loans, and it looks like a lot of people have taken them. But us that talk and network are actually a tiny percentage of the property investment market. There is a silent majority. So if the silent majority haven't taken bounce back loans, and it looks like only a relatively small percentage of property businesses have, then that facilitates the lenders taking quite a hard line, because yes, they don't get to lend to that group of people, but if that group of people is a very small percentage of their business, it won't worry them commercially. I think if bounce back loans are very widespread amongst the whole property investment community, then some of these lenders will be forced to kind of rethink, because commercially they need to lend, you know, and turning away everyone isn't going to help them do that. And there'll be commercial pressure to sort of relax on ultimately what is a moral rather than a credit risk issue for them. But it's early days, and my gut feel is that most property investors have not taken a bounce back loan in the wider market, and that actually most aren't even aware they could even apply for one, is my gut feel, but it's very early.
What other news is key for our listeners to know about property finance? We haven't even said who LendWell is, so apologies to yourself, Daryl, and Stephen Johnson. Stephen Johnson, who's the founder of LendWell. And do you want to just explain to the listeners a little bit about who LendWell is? What's your sweet spot? Who's your target market as such, and geographical spread?
Yeah, so we lend over England and Wales. We don't lend to Scotland or Northern Ireland at the moment. All of our stuff short term. So the mortgage market is really important for us because they pay us back most of the time. So we do bridging loans, so auction purchases, quick money for whatever reason. We do something called a property sales loan. So that's a short term or kind of 12, 18-month loan for developers, whereby if they're under pressure to repay their development finance, so there's a few development finance lenders that aren't lending or have gone bust at the moment. So we've been looking at some of those deals. We can come in, pay the development lender off. Sometimes the developer still needs to finish some of the works on the property, and then provide enough time for them to either sell or to refinance out. And then we also do light development and refurbishment loans, which is probably our core business. So this is anything from buying type property to refurbish it, add kitchens, bathrooms, through to extensions, loft conversions, HMO conversions, and commercial to residential conversions too.
So Daryl, some key information there. So how can people reach you, find out about yourself? What's the best way of connecting with you? Of course, join us on Monday morning. You're going to be on a panel which is focused on the evolution of buy-to-let. I know Karen Bennett's going to be joining us on Thursday evening, which is focused on reducing project costs, development costs, maximizing returns, and possibly this is a more important time to be considering that than at other times. So as I say, we're going to be joined by LendWell a number of times. And also, if you wanted to join us live, you didn't know of this particular session this morning, normally we go live on Fridays at 8:30. Next week, my schedule is a little bit different because I've got my evening meet returning, which probably means I want to sleep in on a Friday morning. I don't know how I'm going to cope, to be fair, with doing evening. I prefer morning events, and that's why I love the property brunch on a Monday morning. It's a great way to start the week. So the key question or the key point to note is people can join us again on Monday morning. As I say, you're going to be in the breakout room now as well on Monday morning. And obviously, I've got to keep it confidential about the breakout rooms in terms of what was said in there. But in terms of the quality of attendee in the breakout room on Monday morning, it was phenomenal. You know, to have yourself, Stephen Johnson, Adam Lawrence, for starters, in that breakout room on Monday. I was just, wow, in awe, to say the least.
Yeah, and it was the first time we combined the funding and the deals breakout rooms, and it worked really well actually, because there's quite a lot of crossover between the two anyway, because every deal needs funding, and every funder looks at lots of deals. So it was a really good way of us all kind of sharing what we've been seeing in the market so far and some of the early trends. So I look forward to doing the same again on Monday this week.
So yeah, that's a great point. So we've combined the deals and funding room, and also there's another room which is focused on design and planning. That's with Ben Richards of Aura Architecture. It's great. In the funding room, we've got Ronald Fletcher Baker on board, Paul Pinder, one of the partners. So as I say, that's this coming Monday morning. Any final thoughts, Daryl, you want to add before we come to a conclusion?
No, so I'm very much looking forward to Monday and hoping that we get lots of people attend and that those people bring their questions. I think with a topic like the evolution of buy-to-let, it's all about learning from each other. There's so much going on, so everyone's experience on the ground is really valuable. So I'm looking forward to kind of sharing mine and also learning from others.
Massive thanks, Daryl, and thanks to our listeners.